They sold my 40-acre ranch while I was burying my father. $1. That's what the HOA president's daughter paid for 3 generations of my family's blood, sweat, and legacy. $1 goddamn dollar. I'm standing here watching her bulldozers tear into land my grandfather cleared with his bare hands. The diesel smoke burns my throat, and the grinding of machinery drowns out every meadowlark song I grew up hearing. But here's the thing they didn't count on. I'm a welder, and the fence I built, it didn't just mark property lines. It exposed every lie, bankrupted every conspirator, and sent her straight to federal prison. What would you do if someone stole your inheritance while you grieved? Tell me in the comments. Where are you watching from? Because the property law loophole I found works in all 50 states. Stay with me. This gets good. My name is Garrett Murdoch, 52 years old, 3rd-generation cattle rancher. And up until 6 weeks ago, I thought I knew exactly how my life would end. Right here on Broken Antler Ranch, same 40 acres my grandfather staked in 1961. My father, Emmett, just lost an 18-month war with pancreatic cancer, the kind where you watch a man who could wrestle a steer to the ground waste away to nothing. Those last weeks, I lived at hospice in Colorado Springs, holding his hand while he told the same stories about building this place with a pickup truck and pure stubbornness. I split my time, weekends and summers, on the ranch, trying to keep the fences patched and the cattle fed. When the call came from the funeral home, I thought my hardest day was behind me. But grief does strange things. It dulls your instincts, makes you trust people you shouldn't. While I was gone, the HOA board, the same folks who used to drink my dad's whiskey at every 4th of July barbecue, filed a maintenance lien. Said I owed 6 years of unpaid dues. Funny thing is, we were grandfathered out of that HOA since the day it was formed. But the new president, a woman named Marjorie Keene, decided that technicalities were optional when money was on the line. When I got back from the burial, there was a notice stapled to the gatepost. Property sold via HOA auction. New owner, Emily Keene. Her daughter. The one who drives a Tesla and thinks cowboy boots are ironic. I thought it was some kind of sick joke. I called the county clerk. They confirmed it. 40 acres. Sold. For $1. I drove into town, still wearing my funeral suit, to find Marjorie. She was standing outside the HOA office in her pearls and pastel cardigan, talking to contractors about the future subdivision. My father's barn, our barn, was marked with orange spray paint, tagged for demolition. I remember stepping out of the truck. The ground felt like it was tilting. Marjorie, I said quietly. You sold my land. She smiled, not a hint of guilt. You should have paid your dues, Garrett. The rules apply to everyone. Not to me, I said. Not to this land. She tilted her head, the kind of pitying smirk rich people use when they think they've won. You'll thank me someday. This development will raise property values. Your father would have wanted progress. That's when something inside me cracked, not like anger, but something colder. I realized she thought she'd buried my family's legacy under paperwork. But what she didn't know, was that I had something stronger than her signatures. A fence. One I welded myself. And behind every inch of that steel was a secret she'd never see coming. That night, I didn't sleep. The moonlight poured through my bedroom window, silver and cold, lighting up the old photos on my wall, my grandfather on a tractor, my dad in his uniform, me holding a newborn calf. 3 generations, frozen in time, staring back at me as if to say, don't you dare let them take this. So I went outside. The bulldozers were quiet now, parked by the gate like sleeping beasts. I grabbed my welding mask and flashlight, the same gear I'd used since I was 19. The night air bit through my flannel, but I didn't care. Every spark that flew from my torch was a heartbeat. Every hiss of molten steel was a promise. You see, that fence I mentioned earlier, it wasn't just a barrier. It was a record. My father used to joke that I was obsessed with details. He was right. Over the years, every post I welded had a stamp, a microscopic etching burned into the steel, showing its GPS coordinates, serial code, and date of installation. A traceable signature, unique to our property. I built it that way because out here, when land disputes happen, documentation is everything. So when Marjorie sold my land, she didn't realize something crucial: the HOA's survey map used their own coordinates, not mine. Which meant the land they sold wasn't technically mine. It was theirs. At least on paper. The next morning, I called a friend, Luis Vega, a county inspector who owed my dad a few favors. I told him to come out to Broken Antler Ranch, quiet and off the record. When he showed up, I handed him a coffee and pointed to the property line. "Check the fence data," I said. "Tell me what you see." He ran his scanner along the steel, frowning as the numbers lit up. "Garrett, this fence is embedded with microcode. Where'd you get this system?" "I built it," I said simply. Luis blinked. "Then I think you've got something, man. According to this, your property extends 42 feet past where the HOA claims it ends. That means their entire new road. It's sitting on your land." I smiled for the first time in weeks. "Good," I said. "Let them dig their own grave." By noon, construction crews rolled in again, Emily Keene leading them from her SUV, iced latte in hand. She didn't even look at me when she gave the bulldozer signal. The ground trembled as the blade tore into the dirt, right over my father's old irrigation trench. And that's when it happened. The dozer stopped. Alarms blared. Hydraulic fluid sprayed into the air. The operator climbed out, cursing. The trench they hit wasn't empty, it was full of old utility conduits, the kind that belonged to the state, not private landowners. Luis turned pale. "Garrett, those are protected lines. The HOA just violated federal land law." Emily's smug face dropped. She started yelling into her phone, pacing, trying to blame the previous owner. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, arms crossed, watching her panic under the same sun that used to warm my father's fields. By evening, county vehicles surrounded the site. The sheriff came by, scratching his head. "Garrett, you knew about this?" I shrugged. "Just knew where my fence stood." The sheriff looked at Emily. "Ma'am, you can't be doing construction here. These are protected easements. You'll have to halt everything." She sputtered, "This is HOA property." "Not according to these records," he said, pointing at Luis's scanner. "This belongs to the Murdoch estate." For the first time, silence fell over the place. Even the wind seemed to stop. I looked at Emily and said, "You thought you bought my land for $1. You didn't buy land. You bought a lawsuit." That night, she left in tears. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Because the fence didn't just mark lines, it held proof of every illegal deal her mother had ever made. And once I revealed it, the Keenes wouldn't just lose their case. They'd lose everything. The next few days, I kept quiet. No shouting. No threats. Just silence, the kind that makes guilty people talk. While the HOA panicked over their halted construction, I spent my nights out by the barn, staring at the fence that had now become my only ally. I'd built it over 15 years, piece by piece. Each weld, each section of steel, told a story, not just of property lines, but of ownership, blood, and truth. My dad used to say, "A man's work is the only contract that never lies." Turns out, he was right. On the third night, I pulled open an old locker in the tool shed. Inside, wrapped in burlap, was a rusted external drive, industrial grade, dust-covered but still working. It was hooked into my welder's digital interface for years, quietly recording every piece of metal I tagged. Every barcode. Every map coordinate. Every inspection note. I plugged it into my laptop. The screen lit up with rows of data, blue on black. Thousands of entries, like an invisible diary of my land. I scrolled through until I found one marked MKR 0007. It was the section right near the old North Creek, the same spot where the HOA's boundary survey began. When I clicked the file, my heart stopped. Embedded in the metadata was a document hash, a digital footprint of every legal map ever uploaded for this property. The system had automatically downloaded and logged every file from the county's open records database whenever they made an update. And there it was, a change. A forged plat file, uploaded 6 months ago by someone using an HOA administrative login. The owner of that account? Marjorie Keene. I stared at the screen, my pulse hammering in my ears. They hadn't just stolen my land. They'd rewritten it. I spent the next 12 hours cross-referencing everything. The lien documents, the tax notices, the so-called unpaid dues. All of it traced back to a single firm in Denver, Greystone Management LLC, a consulting company that just happened to share a post office box with Marjorie's real estate lawyer. I smiled bitterly. They'd gotten sloppy. That morning, I drove into town with my laptop on the passenger seat. I stopped by the courthouse and asked to see a man named Deputy Clerk Sam Harlan. He was old school, one of those guys who still wore suspenders and kept a flask in his desk. My father used to fish with him back in the 70s. Sam, I said, setting my laptop down. You ever heard of a ranch being sold for $1? He looked up from his paperwork, frowning. Only when someone's laundering money or trying to dodge taxes. Why? I turned the screen toward him. Because my ranch just went for that price. And I've got proof the HOA forged county maps to make it happen. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Then he leaned back in his chair, whistled low, and muttered, "Garrett, you're about to start a war." I shrugged. Then I hoped they brought enough ammo. Sam called in a friend from the state attorney's office, a woman named Dana Wyatt, sharp as a blade and twice as cold. She spent an hour combing through the data. When she finally looked up, there was a spark in her eyes. "Mr. Murdoch," she said, "this isn't just property fraud. This is racketeering. Wire fraud. Possibly even land grant manipulation under federal jurisdiction." I smiled faintly. "So what happens now?" "Now." She closed the laptop and stood. "Now we let them hang themselves." Over the next week, the county sent inspectors, auditors, and surveyors, all under the guise of routine compliance checks. They walked the property lines, scanned my fence, and quietly collected evidence from the HOA's development site. Meanwhile, Marjorie and Emily acted like everything was fine, still posting photos online of their upcoming luxury community. But one morning, I caught something strange. Marjorie was out by the gate, clipboard in hand, talking to a man in a suit. They didn't see me watching from the barn. He handed her an envelope, thick, sealed, and she slipped it into her purse like a thief hiding stolen gold. That was when I knew she'd realized the trap was closing. Because what she didn't understand was that my fence wasn't just metal, it was memory. Every weld carried truth. Every inch of steel was a witness. And soon enough, the law would make it speak. The courthouse in El Paso County sits on a hill overlooking the plains, red brick, white columns, and the faint smell of pine drifting in from the foothills. I'd driven past it 100 times in my life, never thinking I'd one day walk through its doors carrying a hard drive that could burn an entire HOA to the ground. The case was filed as Murdoch vs. Keene Homeowners Association, et al. But to me, it wasn't a lawsuit. It was payback. I wore my father's old denim jacket that morning. Not out of nostalgia, out of principle. The Keenes walked and dressed like royalty, Emily in designer sunglasses, Marjorie in a pearl suit that probably cost more than my pickup. Their lawyer, slick and smug, smirked at me as if I was some old fool swinging above his weight. He wasn't smirking for long. The state's attorney, Dana Wyatt, set up her laptop, and when the projector lit the courtroom wall, it showed a live map of my fence. Every weld, every post, every timestamp appeared like glowing veins of truth across the land. Your Honor, she began, the plaintiff, Mr. Murdoch, recorded property data through a unique digital system embedded in his welded fencing. The defense argues he forfeited ownership through an HOA auction. Our evidence shows otherwise. Marjorie's lawyer scoffed. Are we really taking the word of a rancher's fence over legal paperwork? Dana didn't blink. We're taking the word of federal data over a forged file. She clicked again. On screen appeared two maps, one official, one altered. At first glance, they looked identical. But when Dana zoomed in, you could see it, a shift of coordinates by 42 feet. Exactly what Luis Vega, the county inspector, had found. The courtroom went dead quiet. Dana continued, this alteration was uploaded from an HOA administrative account belonging to Mrs. Marjorie Keene. The metadata confirms her system signature. This wasn't a clerical error, it was intentional. Marjorie's face drained of color. Emily stared at the table, eyes wide. Then Dana pulled up the lien documents, 6 years of supposed unpaid dues. Your Honor, these payments were for services never rendered. Garbage collection, water maintenance, community pool access, none of which exist on the Murdoch property. In short, the HOA fabricated debt to justify a fraudulent sale. The judge, a tall man with silver hair, leaned forward. Mrs. Keene, do you have an explanation for this? Marjorie stammered something about clerical confusion and technical mistakes, but her voice trembled. Her lawyer whispered urgently, but she waved him off, pride still clinging to her like perfume gone sour. Then it was my turn. I stood up, looked at the judge, and said, Your Honor, this land isn't just dirt. It's my family's story. They took it while I buried my father, and they thought paperwork would cover the smell of theft. But the steel doesn't lie. I plugged in my drive. The next image on the wall was a time-lapse, 15 years of fence building, captured by my welder's digital records. Every spark, every weld, every piece of proof of ownership documented by date, GPS, and serial. When it ended, no one moved. The air felt heavy, like the moment before a storm breaks. Dana closed her binder. The plaintiff rests. The defense tried to recover, calling their surveyor, who fumbled through his testimony, then Emily, who broke under pressure and admitted she didn't understand the paperwork. But the final blow came when the county IT director testified that the altered file originated from Marjorie's personal IP address, traced back to her HOA office computer. Marjorie shouted, That's impossible. Someone hacked me. The judge banged the gavel. Enough. He looked down at the documents one last time, then at me. Mr. Murdoch, he said, voice steady, I don't know how many men would have the patience to fight for what's theirs this way. But I do know this, your fence just made legal history. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff. All assets of the Keene Homeowners Association are hereby frozen pending criminal investigation. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Emily buried her face in her hands. Marjorie just stared straight ahead, like a statue cracking from the inside. As I walked out into the sunlight, cameras flashing, someone from the press shouted, Garrett. What do you have to say about today's verdict? I looked back at the courthouse and said. I told them, this fence wasn't built to keep people out. It was built to keep the truth in. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over yet. Because when rich people fall, they don't fall quietly. They claw. They scheme. They dig. And Marjorie Keene wasn't done digging. 3 weeks after the verdict, the Keene mansion went dark. The HOA office shut its doors, the sign torn down by someone who'd probably lost their home to their scams. For a while, it seemed like peace had finally settled over Broken Antler Ranch. The cows grazed again. The wind carried the smell of mesquite and wet soil after a long rain. But quiet doesn't always mean calm. One morning, I found tire tracks near the north gate. Fresh ones, deep, heavy. I followed them, shotgun in hand, until I saw her, Marjorie Keene, standing in the weeds, staring at the fence like it was some living thing that had beaten her. Her pearls were gone. Her hair, a mess. She looked smaller, like all that arrogance had been burned off by humiliation. "You ruined me," she said softly, not turning around. "Do you even know what you've done? My husband left. My daughter's under investigation. Everything I built, gone." I stepped closer. "You didn't build anything, Marjorie. You just took what wasn't yours and called it progress." She turned, eyes wild. "You think you won? You think they'll let you keep this place after what you exposed? You embarrassed men with power, Garrett. Developers. Investors. They'll bury you in lawsuits till you're old and broke." I shook my head. "Maybe. But at least I'll die on my own land." For a moment, she just stood there, trembling, desperate. Then she spat on the dirt, climbed into her car, and tore off down the road. Dust rose behind her, curling like smoke. I didn't see her again for months. Until the day the feds came. Turns out, Dana's investigation went further than anyone expected. Those fraudulent land transfers. They weren't limited to my ranch. Marjorie's HOA had been flipping properties illegally across 3 states, using shell companies, fake liens, and manipulated surveys. They'd stolen over $18 million in total. When they arrested her, I was in town picking up welding rods. I saw it on the diner TV, Marjorie in cuffs, head down, escorted past flashing cameras. The ticker at the bottom read, "HOA president indicted on federal fraud charges." I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just sat there, coffee in hand, watching the same woman who once called me a stubborn relic, now being called a criminal. That evening, I came home and walked along the fence one last time. The sun was low, that golden hour when the fields look like they're on fire. The steel posts glowed warm in the light, each one a marker of blood, sweat, and defiance. Halfway down the line, I stopped at the final post, the one my father welded with me the summer before he got sick. His initials were there, etched deep, E.M. I brushed the dust away and whispered, "We did it, Dad." Then, just for the hell of it, I struck the torch one more time. The flame hissed to life, bright and alive. I welded a small plate to that post, one last addition. On it, I engraved 5 words that summed up the whole damn story. Land remembers who owns it. The next morning, I woke to the sound of hooves, wild mustangs running along the ridge, free as the wind. I leaned on the fence, watching them disappear into the horizon. The phone buzzed in my pocket, a message from Dana. "Keene sentenced. 20 years. You're officially clear." I turned the phone off, looked out over the land, and smiled. This wasn't victory. It was balance. And as the sun rose over Broken Antler Ranch, I realized something my father had been trying to teach me all along. You can't own the earth. You can only earn it.